Once upon a time, in a far-off land, a child was born with a caul about his head.
Now, a caul is actually part of the membrane, the birth membrane, that sometimes can get stuck around a newborn's head. It doesn't happen very often. It happens like once out of every 80,000. And it's not dangerous or anything. It's just something that every once in a while happens. And in medieval days, people thought that it was lucky.
So it was prophesied that the child would be one of great fortune, and on his 19th name day, he would marry the king's daughter.
Who would have predicted this? What a specific prediction. Weird, right?
Soon after, the king visited the humble town, but no one yet knew that he was the king.
Now, how did they not know that he was the king? I mean, kings, stereotypically, when they go places, they make a big f***ing deal about, hey, the king is now here.
When he asked for news, they told him of the child's birth and the prophecy that the boy would marry the king's daughter.
And the king was totally okay with it, and everybody lived happily ever after. Just kidding. Classism exists.
The king, who had a wicked heart, was very angry to have heard this. He went to the parents in a most friendly manner and said to them kindly,
"Good people, give your child up to me, and I shall take the greatest care of him."
At first they refused, but the stranger offered large amounts of gold.
"If the child was born to be so lucky,"
the disguised king argued,
"then surely everything will turn out for the best for him."
The parents reluctantly agreed.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely give away your lucky son to the first dude with gold that walks through town. That's great. That's good. That's great.
The king placed the infant in a small wooden box and rode away with it for a long distance until he came to deep water, into which he threw the box containing the small infant. As the king rode away, he said to himself, "From this unwelcome suitor, I have saved my daughter."
Hi, I'm Brady, and this is Storytime. So here's the deal with this one, gang. This is the first fairy tale that I ever heard as but a child. This was told to me by my Aunt Sandy, and it was a little bit different than the actual telling. This story was recorded by the Grimm brothers, but she told me her variation of it, which was just a little bit different, and I'm going to keep to Aunt Sandy's version. This seemed like a perfect first episode of this new podcast, and I really hope you enjoy it. In case you didn't know, I come from the podcast Super Geeky Playdate, where I get to geek out with my very good friends Brian Bales, Adam Matson, and Matthew Koenig. If you haven't checked that out, please do. And please rate and review. And now, on with story time.
But the boy's box did not sink. It traveled for miles down a winding river until it came to a creek near a small mill. The miller's man, who fortunately was standing near the bank, happened to notice it and drew it near with a hook. He carried it to the miller and his wife, and as they had no children, they were quite delighted, and said that heaven had sent a little boy unto them.
So this part sounds a lot like Moses, right? There's a lot of fairy tales that have this sort of thing, where a child is put into a basket and sent down the river, and he is found by a different economic class.
18 years later, the king was caught in a storm near that very mill and stopped to ask for shelter. The king, noticing the youth, asked the miller if that tall young man was his son,
No, he is a foundling.
replied the miller.
18 years ago, one of our men found him in the mill creek.
The king knew this must be the child of fortune, and therefore the one that he had thrown in the water. He did, however, hide his vexation, and said kindly to the miller,
I want to send a letter to the queen, my wife.
My wife? You guys remember Borat?
And if the young man will take it to her, I will give him 2 gold pieces for his trouble. We are at the king's service.
replied the miller.
Boy, prepare yourself for this noble journey.
Then the king wrote a letter to the queen, containing these words.
As soon as the boy who brings this letter arrives, let him be killed. I shall expect to find him dead and buried upon my return.
The youth was soon on his way with the letter, but upon darkness he found himself lost in the great forest. He did, however, see a glimmering light, which he walked to find a small house. He rapped upon the door and received no answer, so he entered and found a large cottage with benches and beds for a great many men. As he searched, however, he found only one small, frail old woman sitting by a fire.
Who are you, and what do you know?
I forgot. We have not given this character a name yet. Let's name him, Stephen.
I am Stephen Miller,
Said the young man,
and I know everything.
What brings you to this place?
asked the old woman.
I bring a letter from the king to the queen, and I require only shelter and sleep for the night.
Very well, child.
The old woman said, her heart softening.
But you have found yourself in a den of thieves. Rest here at your own peril.
The boy rested, out of necessity, though he hugged his precious letter tight. Much later into the night, the thieves returned to their homestead.
Who is this boy, old woman?
Asked the prince of thieves.
He is but a messenger, nothing to the likes of you.
We will see about that when we see what the boy carries.
Then the robbers went softly to the youth, took the letter from his hands, and read within it that as soon as the bearer arrived at the palace, he was to lose his life. Then pity arose in the hard-hearted robbers, and the prince of thieves tore up the letter. In its stead, he wrote a letter in the king's voice, saying that the bearer of the letter should marry the king's daughter at once and with no hesitation. Then these hardened and bloodthirsty criminals left the boy on his bench to rest for the night. He awoke a few hours later, thanked the old woman for her hospitality, and continued, unknowingly, on his journey. When the young hero reached the palace, the queen squealed with delight. Finally, her husband had found their daughter an acceptable suitor. The two were married at once in an elaborate and beautiful ceremony.
Did the princess want to marry Stephen? I don't know. In the original text of the Grimm brothers, it says,
He was very handsome and admirable, so that the king's daughter soon learned to love him very much and was quite happy with him.
I mean, that's pretty good when it comes to the Grimm brothers. The fact that they mentioned that a woman had feelings, I mean, you know, what more could you ask for? What more could you possibly ask for?
Not long after, when the king returned home to his castle, and he found the prophecy fulfilled, he became enraged with his wife.
How has this happened?
He said.
I have in my letter given very different orders.
Then the queen gave him the letter and said,
You may see for yourself what is stated there.
The king read the letter and instantly believed that the boy had tricked him. He quickly came up with an evil plot.
You will not get off so easily, for whoever marries my daughter must bring me 3 golden hairs. Yeah, 3 golden hairs from the giant, from beyond our realm.
Stephen, the child of fortune, went on this quest happily.
Oh, I will fetch you your 3 hairs, great king.
I worry that our hero sounds too cocky. He's not supposed to be cocky. He's just supposed to sound confident.
And I will do you and your daughter great honor.
He left the castle at once, eager to prove his merit to the king. He came first upon a large city. Some of the inhabitants gathered around him. One shouted out,
Who are you, and what do you know?
I'm Stephen Miller,
replied the lucky boy.
and I know everything.
Tell us then,
The townfolk demanded.
why does our fountain no longer spring?
Once, long ago, the fountain in the middle of the city had rained liquid silver.
If you can explain to us why our fountain no longer springs, then we will grant you passage.
Our hero thought about the dilemma for merely a minute before he said,
I can solve your problem. I can restore your silver fountain.
It sounds like the Shrine of the Silver Monkey. Remember Legends of the Hidden Temple?
But first, I must demand passage through this city. And winkst I return,
Am I using Winkst right?
I will have your answer.
The townsfolk liked that a lot, and they allowed the stranger to pass. Before long, he came upon another large city.
Who are you? And what do you know?
Yelled the townsfolk.
Nobody's subtle in these stories. Everybody just yells out exactly what they're thinking immediately.
I am Stephen Miller, and I know everything.
Replied our hero.
Tell us then,
Said the townsfolk.
all-knowing one. Once we had a tree which could grow golden fruit. But in these past years, it has withered. Tell us how to restore our golden tree, and we will grant you passage.
Our hero thought about the dilemma for merely a minute before he said,
I can solve your problem. I can restore your golden tree. But first, I must demand passage through this city. And winkst I return,
The more I hear it, the more it doesn't sound right.
I will have your answer.
The townsfolk liked that a lot, and they allowed the stranger to pass. Before long, he came upon a large river. There sat a single boatsman.
Who are you? And what do you know?
There's the third one. They always come in threes.
I am Stephen Miller, and I know everything.
Replied our hero.
Tell me then, all-knowing one. Once I was a free man, and now I am stuck ferrying across this great river. How do I break this curse? Tell me, and I will grant you passage.
Our hero thought about the dilemma for merely a minute before he said,
I can solve your problem. I can restore your freedom. But first, I must demand passage through this river. And winkst I return.
Oh, so I just Googled it, and it's not actually a word. I think I'm combining whence and whilst. Whensked. Okay.
I will have your answer.
The boatsman liked that a lot, and he ferried the stranger across the mighty river. Upon the distant shore, our hero saw that the world was vastly different. Above him, he saw trees scraping the sky, and squirrels the size of horses.
Yeah, it's like Giant Land in Mario Brothers 3.
And larger still, looming in front of him, was a castle made for a giant. He climbed the castle walls for 3 days until he reached the first story. When he reached the first window, he heard light humming coming from within. When he sat upon the ledge, he gazed inside, and he saw a giant, but a little old giant, a small woman, humming to herself as she cut vegetables for a stew. She glanced down and saw our hero, and calmly spoke,
Come in, child. I have been expecting you.
How is that possible, old woman? For not even I knew I would be on this path.
Oh, I have been following your many exploits since last we met when I was in disguise in the den of thieves.
So then you know the quest I am upon. I must take from you 3 of your golden hairs.
Ha! Look closer, child, for my hair has long since turned white. What you seek are 3 hairs from the golden head of my son, the giant that rules this realm. He comes now as we speak. Quickly, child, hide yourself in the folds of my apron, and I will help you best I can.
The boy did as he was told, and soon, as she said, a massive male giant, 3 times the size of his mother, entered the castle. He held in his hand 2 whales, which he had caught for their dinner.
I've had a long day, Mother. I require rest.
Of course, child. Come lay your head upon my lap, and let a mother comfort her son.
As soon as he kicked off his boots and rested his head, the giant fell into a deep sleep. Slowly and carefully, his mother reached up and plucked one of his golden hairs.
What was that, Mother?
I didn't hear anything, child. You know, I was just sitting here thinking about the great city, which once had the silver fountain. Why do you suppose it is the fountain no longer flows?
If only those fools knew. The silver of their fountain no longer flows because there is a great toad at its base. The more worms it eats, the larger it gets, and its body blocks the pipes.
As soon as he finished those words, the giant fell into a deep sleep. Slowly and carefully, his mother reached up and plucked one of his golden hairs.
What was that, Mother?
I didn't hear anything, child. You know, I was sitting here and thinking of the great city, which once possessed a tree that bared golden fruit. Why do you suppose it is the tree no longer grows?
If only those fools knew. The gold in their tree no longer grows because there is a great rat at its roots. The more the rat gnaws at the roots, the weaker the tree becomes, and the fewer fruit it bears.
As soon as he finished those words, the giant fell into a deep sleep. Slowly and carefully, his mother reached up and plucked the last golden hair.
What was that, Mother?
I didn't hear anything, child. You know, I was just sitting here and thinking of the lone boatsman that ferries perpetually across our great river. Why do you suppose it is that the boatsman cannot leave his post?
Oh, if only that fool knew. The curse is passed on to unsuspecting travelers. All the boatsman needs to do is thrust his oars into the next traveler's hands, and then he will be free, and they will be stuck with his burden.
As soon as he finished those words, the giant fell into a deep sleep, and our hero wiggled out from the apron of the mother and thanked her gladly for the luck she had bestowed upon his life. He got back to the boatsman and wisely waited until he was back across to share the secret of the curse.
Thank you, great traveler,
said the boatsman.
The next man I see, I will thrust these oars into his hands and escape this wretched curse.
He returned to the great city and told them the answer to their plight. They immediately dug up the great rat, and instantly their tree once again bore golden fruit.
We must reward you, great hero,
the townsfolk said.
We will send you back along your path with as much golden fruit as a cart can carry.
He returned to the next great city and told them the answer to their plight. They immediately dug up the great toad, and instantly their silver fountain began to flow.
We must reward you, great hero,
the townsfolk said.
We will send you back along your path with as many gallons of silver as a cart can carry.
Stephen Miller then returned to the castle, and he met with the king.
How has this happened?
Demanded the king.
You have returned with not only the 3 golden hairs, but with riches beyond those that I have ever seen. Tell me, unworthy one, where did you find such treasures?
Our hero thought about the dilemma for merely a minute before he said,
The land beyond the river is full of riches, great king. Go there. Check it out.
The king left, but he was never seen again. In time, his daughter became queen, and Stephen Miller ruled by her side. Some say you can still hear the voice of the old king when you are near the river.
Why can't I leave this boat? Hey, it's me, Brady. Thanks for listening to Storytime. My special guests this week have been Mike Chex and Madam J. Special thanks to the Grimm brothers and Aunt Sandy. Please, let me know what you thought. Rate and review on iTunes. Next week, we're going to go back to the beginning with Greek mythology.